Welcome to Interesting Choices, the show where we examine media of all sorts and the interesting choices that they make. I'm one of your hosts, Kate.
And I'm Sky.
Hello, Sky.
Hey, Kate. And our movie this episode is The Warrior and the Sorceress.
Another David Carradine joint.
Yeah, we're knocking them all out.
Yeah, he's done a lot of bad movies.
And this is very much a bad movie.
Yeah, it's, an 80s sword and sorcery movie, but super low budget. Everything feels like it was done on a high school play set.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are just, there's a lot about it. I think initially when they kind of started in with the idea for this movie, they're like, have you seen Yojimbo?
I was going to say, because the entire plot of this movie can be summed up with Fistful of Dollars, but Conan the Barbarian.
Yeah, and so someone was like, no, I didn't see Yojimbo, but I did see Fistful of Dollars.
Yeah.
But I kind of fell asleep halfway through. I'm sure it was good. Let's just do one of those.
Yeah. And I don't know. I feel like I should preface this a little bit just because the only reason I suggested this movie is because I hadn't seen it. Mm-hmm. I had seen the trailer and I had seen, I guess you'd call it the cover, maybe the poster for, I have the Laserdisc. That's not the version I watched, but yeah, on the cover of the Laserdisc, you have David Carradine and it's like an airbrushed side of the van painting. He's very, very jacked. Like he's just He-Man jacked. And there's a woman clinging to his legs. She has 4 breasts. The trailer and the cover imply this to be the Sorceress. That's not who it is in the movie.
Nope.
It's not even the same 4-breasted woman. There's a different one in the movie. The one on the cover in the trailer does not appear in the movie, weirdly enough.
It feels like a lot of this production was just like told to someone over the phone of what to do. Be like, all right, find a picture of David Carradine, throw him up there, 4-breasted woman, Boris Vallejo style, go. Yeah.
And I mean, if it was just the poster, I would get that. But they have the woman from the poster in the trailer, and it introduces her as the sorcerer.
Oh, that's weird.
Yeah, Sorceress. I mean,
maybe they initially started off with her, and then she was like, I can't do a full feature-length movie in this terrible makeup. So I quit. And then they got this other lady, and she's like, I have 2 breasts, and I'm willing to show them literally every scene I'm in the movie. So let's go.
I mean, it pretty much follows the plot of Yojimbo, Fistful of Dollars exactly. David Carradine's a guy who is good at weapons, shows up in town with 2 factions fighting over an thing, plays them against each other. It goes awry. He gets Thing at the end to give him the better edge against someone and wins. The only real wrinkle is there's a 3rd faction that sort of takes over near the end.
I wasn't actually expecting the end villain to be the slaver guy because he was only in there for like 10 minutes.
Like, I kind of felt like that's what they intended, but they really didn't. They set him up as definitely someone that the 2 major factions in town feel like they need to have a truce with each other in order to be on their guard while he's there. So it felt like there was something there, but it really felt like the meat of the story would have just been the 2 factions fighting each other over a well. It's some kind of fantasy world where water is scarce and there's a well in the middle of town and the 2 factions are fighting over the well. That's it.
So I watched this movie on Amazon Prime, and it recommended me another David Carradine joint called Dude Warriors, which was exactly the same movie except set in Mad Max future. So just replace swords with guns, kinda, and it like looks. It might have just used the same scenes, like the same scenery and like shots anyway, except there's some cars instead of wagons. there's a period when he was just like very addicted to cocaine, where he did a bunch of these movies in order to pay for his cocaine habit, legitimately. And so his acting in this movie is so wooden. It feels like he does more action, right? Like he swings his sword around and stuff, but he doesn't even try to like emote at all. He just says some lines as straight as possible and then swings a sword.
One of the parts like that sticks out for me is in the beginning, he signs on with one of the sides. It's led by what I can only describe as Dollar Store Varys.
Or Dollar Store Baron Harkonnen.
Yeah. But he signs up with them to fight the other faction, and he overhears them plotting his death, like, right away. Like, as soon as he leaves the room, he's not even quite closed the door, and they're already plotting to kill him after everything's done. So when they get in the middle of town for the big planned rumble, he just stands there and he's like, I don't work with people who plot my demise, and then walks off to the sidelines.
Not even very far, like 10 feet away. And then he just sits down and laughs at him for like the entire duration of the fight.
Yeah. And then they just proceed to have the most sword shaky standoff with each other.
They did absolutely nothing to establish that anyone was a credible threat in this entire film.
Yeah.
I've seen high school football rumbles that were more fierce than this.
It almost feels like, especially in that scene, it almost felt like they got everyone together and then the direction was fight, but everyone wasn't really sure what to do. So they were just trying to figure it out, and they used that take. But you kind of get the sense they do a good job of one side is definitely better equipped than the other. They actually have some semblance of armor, and I guess their swords are shinier, which makes them better.
They seem more organized because they're literally in uniforms. So everyone looks like they're in that faction. The other side's just a little bit more ragtag. I'm not entirely sure why they haven't been wiped out entirely, because they're useless.
They're useless, and their boss is getting most of his ideas from a lizard puppet man thing.
Yeah, that was wild. When I first started watching this movie, I was like, okay, this is going to be like Survivors in the Wastes. And then they introduced that thing, and I was like, oh, there are like monsters in this. Like aliens and stuff. I just thought this is going to be about like some sort of sword western, but no.
Yeah, it's just barely fantasy. There's a couple weird guys that lead David Carradine into Dollar Store Varys's castle, and they have some questionable prosthetics to make them look like fantastical humanoid creature beings.
Yeah. They're just kind of ugly people, is what they were going for with the makeup. It wasn't until you got the slavers in town where you're like, oh, okay, there are humans that are different, not just a talking snake. And I didn't even know that lizard guy was a man, because it's kept under a blanket the entire movie until the very end. And then it's like, oh, you have arms and legs. You can, like, stand and move.
It's so upsetting.
It's really bad. It's also the character of that faction leader. I forgot his name. Doesn't matter. He epitomizes the sort of 80s queer coding of villains.
Yeah.
He was super kind of effeminate and like a larger guy, just wearing like tiny little shorts, like laying around. This movie pretty much has all of the bad negative tropes from 80s movies. It's super sexist. It's super like queer phobic. I would say it's racist, but I think it's too incoherent to be racist.
I'm having a hard time remembering if there is even any people of color in the film at all. I mean, I'm sure there was, but like people's names, I can't remember what anyone was called. I do remember the credits coming up and it saying that David Carradine's character's name was Kane, but I don't remember anyone saying that.
No, they just call him the Dark Warrior the entire film.
Yeah, the Dark One.
The dark one, yeah. There are no actual people of color in this movie. I think there's a bunch of people in like quasi brown face because they are desert dwellers. And then there are those noseless reptile people who are the slavers, who are in sort of vaguely Orientalist, quote unquote, Arabian garb. Everything in this movie is super lazy. Super lazy.
Yeah, when they first showed up, the slavers, I honestly thought they were wearing, like, in the movie, they were wearing masks, not, the actors were wearing prosthetic masks. And it wasn't until we got a few close-ups, it was like, oh, they're supposed to be orcs, I guess? That's what it felt like.
Yeah, they're supposed to be orcs or your generic, like Babylon 5, Star Trek Next Generation, rubber face people monsters. If you've ever played the game Kenshi on the PC, it's kind of an open world strategy, survival, post-apocalyptic game. It's known to be a story generator, kind of like RimWorld or a lot of other things where there's no real plot. Your character's just thrust into this place, and there are roving bands of bandits, slavers, weird alien people that you interact with. It's basically this movie as a game, except with less boobs.
Yeah, there are a lot of that.
It's super excessive.
It really is, even for this kind of thing, which seems like was a direct-to-video kind of deal, where they would put that in so people would feel like they'd gotten more than just a VHS tape, but oh boy.
Yeah. I do find it pretty hilarious that one of the main faction leaders, his entire impetus for keeping the Sorceress around was so that she would make this magical sword for him that was supposedly so good that it could cut stone or whatever. And then David Carradine gets it and it does nothing. It's super useless.
He gets it. He's like, it's just a sword. And the priestess, she's the priestess. She's not even really a sorceress, even though she's the sorceress. It's like, strike the anvil with it. And he just kind of looks at her and she's like, strike the anvil. And he does it. And then there's like this kind of a, like almost if you slap a steak with a spoon sound when he hits the anvil, and then it kind of splits a little bit.
That is literally the only thing it does. But in the fight, it's not even that effective. Like, he hits people with it, and then they don't die. He has to keep chopping at them, and he gets disarmed by the evil guy. The evil guy's like, oh, this sword. But then it doesn't help him either. It helps no one. It's just a regular sword.
Well, they kind of set it up like what she says, only in your hands is the magic sword, but it doesn't help him at all. So he had more luck with his like little dinky throwing knives.
He did. He killed like 10 people with those throwing knives. And then, yeah, he used the sword. I think the only thing the sword may have potentially done, and this is me being super generous, is that maybe it helped heal his wounds after he got beat up. Maybe. Like, they couldn't even get their magical MacGuffin right? Like, there's no point in the Sorceress even being in the movie. There's no point for that sword being in the movie. There's no point for like half this movie.
Well, it's funny too, as far as the sword goes, because they show a sword in the trailer and they have to forge the magic sword, and it's a completely different sword. Like, even that, like in the trailer, it's very much one of those like Cold Steel display Excalibur copy things you see at like the mall or whatever. And then in the movie, it's just his sword that he had in the beginning, but the hilt's gold. That's it.
Yeah. Like, nothing about this movie. I don't even know. Like, it makes me feel better about how far like genre media has come in the last like 20-30 years, because as nonsensical as parts of Game of Thrones or any sci-fi original TV show are, they're still 1,000 times more coherent than this thing.
Yeah, that entire season of Eureka where they were just hawking Gillette products, better than this.
I definitely didn't see that, but maybe I should check it out.
Yeah, Eureka on Sci-Fi. There was like a season where they were running out of money, so they just went hard to the wall selling Gillette. It's a town. All the geniuses in the country are there. They do the secret. It's like Area 51 if it was, like set in Riverdale.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not Riverdale, but the comics Riverdale.
Sure.
And then they open up a special branch of research so they can do Gillette projects. And there's just a guy on a Segway telling them how great Gillette products are.
Honestly, that sounds way more enjoyable than the movie we both watched.
Yeah. Like, it's blatant commercialism, but at least like it leans into it and it's actually a little charming in that how self-aware it seems and tries not to pretends it isn't fully aware of what's going on. But yeah. And getting back to the movie though,
Sure.
as much as I don't want to. Yeah, the runtime, I believe on the version I saw was an hour and 17 minutes.
It was not very long.
Yeah, shorter than Cyber Ninja, but it felt like it was 3 times longer.
Yeah. The pacing was really bad. Every scene with the prelate dragged on for like an hour and a half. That like weird old guy that like lived under the well. Like, I understand that he's there to do exposition, but he definitely pulled down the pace of the movie. And yeah, like the thing about this type of movie where the lone wanderer is coming in, playing both sides in order to like help the townspeople, is that you need to get the sense that at some point he makes a decision to help the townspeople as opposed to just being greedy. In this, he's pretty much greedy the entire time and is just a jerk to everyone. And then only at the end, he's like, I guess I'll give some lip service to this religion that I used to belong to. But, I'm going to take all my gold and go. He didn't leave anything for the people. He was totally okay with just letting, like, hundreds of those villagers kill themselves while, like, trying to get to the well. Like, he did nothing. Much like G Savior, there is no thought to civilian lives in this.
Yeah, I mean, we could go over the plot more, but it really is just shades of Akira Kurosawa. Mm-hmm. There's a few parts that this movie does on its own that are probably worth mentioning. One side seems to be really, really ridiculously, needlessly cruel, constantly. David Carradine switches sides over to them real quick. They're the not Varys side. There's old guy and his commander, lieutenant, suspicious of everyone.
Shirtless lieutenant.
Shirtless suspicions.
Yeah.
And, they're just chowing down, talking, and Lieutenant Shirtless Suspicions throws some meat on the floor. One of the peasants that is just around their clubhouse, I guess, goes for it because they're hungry, and he hucks a knife at the guy's back. Just out of nowhere.
I get the sense that he was a servant. Like, all of the peasants in there were servants. And, yeah, they kill that servant. They just drown a lady for no good reason.
Yeah. For entertainment. They just throw her in a glass box and watch her drown. I was like, this is not okay.
Yeah, all that water is no longer going to be useful. But I guess if you have the well, like, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But the other side is, again, kind of queer-coded and supposedly treacherous, but otherwise they don't seem dangerous at all.
I mean, really, his biggest crime is wearing a person-sized doily into battle.
Mm-hmm.
And that whatever that giant paper mache cushion thing is he rode around on.
Oh, yeah, the big palanquin thing.
Yeah, it looked like it was a big cushion made out of like the same kind of resin that the Burger King play toys are made out of.
Man, I wonder how much of that was the actor and how much of that was the direction.
I don't know. I mean, it could go either way with this thing. It started out, and at least as far as the music goes, I had a little high hopes. They kind of went in with like it felt very Ennio Morricone, and that quickly stopped being good.
Yeah, it devolved into like weird, dark piano jazz at some point. And I was like, oh, sure, this is something. The town that they are fighting over, you never see anything except these sort of inner square of it. You never see villagers' houses. Like, there are hundreds of villagers that live in this town. You never see any of them. You just see this, like, maybe, 100 feet in each direction. Like, 100-foot diameter circle around the well. And it feels like you are watching a show at one of those like medieval times type places where it's like it's time to root for the Black Knight. It's so small scale. Like everything is small scale. The well that they're fighting over is literally just a tiny well, and there are like 4 lazy soldiers posted up at it at any given point that David Carradine dispatched in very quickly. But you could have just shot all of those mans with like a bow or something, and then they'd all be dead. And you could take the well.
Yeah, or used his very effective throwing daggers, which seems like they're way, way better than pretty much every other weapon in the movie.
Yeah. Also, it's weird that the faction that controlled the well never tried to build any fortifications around it. No, like, barricades, no extending their own territory around the well to protect it. It's just like, all right, we'll post these guards.
Yep. I think the whole movie we see, I think there's 6 or 7 locations total. There's the inside of either faction's sanctum fortress type deal. There's the abandoned quarry where they forge the magic sword. There's a couple dungeons. There's the town square. And then there's a wrecked up church where the prelate kind of lives.
That church set is actually really big, and they barely use it.
Yeah.
Like, they have a bunch of, like, talkie scenes there between the prelate and the dark one. But most of the time, it's just like an old man standing in this empty church. Everyone's like, I guess we'll just leave that guy there because he's reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I guess in this version, instead of a family being held captive, it's the priestess. And so David Carradine goes to rescue her, as in the other 2 movies that are basically the same as this. Mm-hmm. And he gets caught and beaten up because, we wouldn't have a movie otherwise.
Yeah. He gets beaten up very late on in the game. And after he gets away with some, like, real heinous crimes, basically, he has switched sides at least twice and has made a lot of money that you never really get the sense of how much anything costs. Because at first he's like, I'm going to kill all these guys for 100, whatever their gold pieces are.
Terrans or Tritons or something.
Yeah.
Terrax.
And then
you never see them, by the way. It's just jingly bags.
And then he's like, I'm going to give you this information for 400 Terrax. And then I'll sell you this weird lizard man for 1,000 Terrax.
And that's right. He captures the lizard guy.
He does. Like, nobody guards anything, even though literally one person could stand on your parapet and see the entire town square and everything that is going on in this like little Shakespeare globe-esque world that they've set up. Yeah, he just gets in and out, and then people are like, yeah, he seems trustworthy. Except we'll betray him. We'll definitely betray him immediately. And then he fights like a tentacle monster.
I was going to ask about that because in the trailer, there's like a floor with holes in it, and a bunch of hands pop up, and it's billed as like some kind of thing. And I guess I was doing something else when that was supposed to have been happening, and I caught the end part where he stabs the tentacle monster in the face, but I missed most of that.
At first, it's just like, I need to inspect your security to make sure the sorceress hasn't escaped. And then it's like, did the sorceress escape? I think she escaped. You should go tell everyone she escaped. Without checking, without confirming. Yep. Nobody confirms anything in this. They just take him at his word constantly. And then he goes in, frees her. She somehow escapes from a dungeon cell without ever going through the main building. I don't understand. And then he gets attacked by this like big goofy tentacle monster, and he cuts off a lot of his tentacles, and then he stabs the thing in the face. It's covered in blood, covered in tentacle schmutz. And then he's like, well, must have taken 20 men to kill that thing. Which honestly was my favorite line in this entire movie. This idea that like Kane is so full of himself that he's just like,
totally took 20 guys to kill that thing, I swear. And then the big gotcha is Lieutenant Shirtless Suspicions is questioning Gullible Guard. Like, did you see her not there? He's like, no. Well, there we go then.
Yeah. Like, no one verifies anything, and they act on the flimsiest amount of... Like, the Dark One snuck into, like, Desert Nazi Palace in order to talk to Desert Hitler and be like, yo, you know that the other side is trying to frame you for poisoning the slavers. And he's like, what? I totally believe you. And I'm going to take my entire army out after giving you all this money and then, like, go after them. Which is the first time he rescues the sorceress. And you're like, why did any of that happen? Why did you believe this guy who just flipped on his last employer to come? What?
Yeah, and it's not even like he flipped off screen. Just like, why is he agreeing to this? It's like he was there. He saw it happen. It happened in Town Square.
He was like 10 feet away. Yeah. Everyone in this movie deserves exactly what they get because they are too stupid to survive in the wastes.
This is definitely a movie I can wholeheartedly recommend watching the trailer of and then forgetting about.
Yeah. It definitely put me down this like weird rabbit hole of 10 other movies that are exactly the same as this movie, all on Prime Video, because, you know, recommendation algorithms do what they do. Mm-hmm. And I just can't even imagine being, I guess, like probably a late teens boy in the 80s, just with an insatiable appetite for this exact movie over and over and over.
I mean, there's a ton of boobs. There's almost an excessive amount of boobs. There is an excessive amount. So, I mean, if that's what you're looking for and you don't really care about anything else, this is your movie, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Just go buy a porno mag or find one in the woods. It'll cost you far less time and sanity.
And you won't have to fast food through all the parts with David Carradine.
No, and the whole part with the, like, lady with the 4 breasts.
Oh, yeah, God.
Their entire plan was they were going to assassinate David Carradine using a lady with 4 breasts who also has a scorpion stinger of some sort in her belly button.
I missed that part. Like, she showed up and I was like, that's not the woman from the trailer, but I already knew that.
Yeah, she was just dancing and she's like, I'm doing a sexy dance. And now you see my 4 breasts. Hello. Here are all of my breasts. And actually, those breast prosthetics, the best prosthetics in the entire movie. Like,
yeah, like it was weird taking a moment and be like, wow, those are actually really nice prosthetics.
Like everything else in the movie is so half-assed that when you see something semi-competent, you're like, huh, I guess that happened. But then, yeah, she dances up to him and
I remember she grabs him, and then I guess I was doing something else because I do not remember what happens next. There's that, and then I remember him getting punched in the face a bunch.
She dances up to him. He's sitting up at the high table, and his character is super stoic, so you never see him react to anything. And so all of the other characters are leering and jeering at this like sexy multi-breasted woman, and he's just like, sure. Yep. And then she comes up super close to him, and you would expect that as a warrior who is not distracted sexually, because he never had any indication that he would be on his guard since he's in a treacherous place. But no, she just like comes up to him, and then like this. There is maybe half a second of this weird flesh tube that comes out of her stomach, I guess, and it has like a little lamprey mouth on it, and you see it like bite onto him or something, and so he's poisoned. And then he starts strangling her, but things happen, and then yeah, like they beat him up, and
yeah. See, I missed all of that. To me, it kind of looked like she was going to give him the Vulcan nerve pinch, and the next thing I know, he's getting punched.
No, it's just like David Carradine pretending to get poisoned while strangling a woman for like a very long time. It's so egregious. This movie is just too much.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those ones where this movie would have been better if it was worse.
Yeah, and it's bad. It's bad in a lot of ways. It's just mediocre bad, which is the worst type of bad, because
yeah,
if it swung for the fences, if it was all like 4-breasted women and that sort of hot nonsense for the entire film, it'd be fine. But there were so many bits where it just dragged, or they were trying to lay out some exposition that didn't matter at all, and just boring.
Yeah. And then there was a part it seemed like almost like a subplot that I completely missed, except for like 2 parts where he gets down beneath the well and he pulls a rock out, and then it starts draining the well, and he's like, there, now they'll think the well is dry. And then someone later in the movie says the well is dry, and then something happens, and I just completely missed all of that.
Yeah. Literally the only thing that precipitated out of that was to increase the conflict between the two sides. He's like, well, okay, I guess I'll remove all
guess
of
I'll poke the bear.
Yeah, I will precipitate a conflict while also reducing the amount of resources that these villagers have for funsies. Because there was no plan. There's never been a plan. It seems like the entire time everything he's doing is just incidental to his making money scheme. Because when he goes and like tries to rescue the sorceress, he doesn't do it intentionally. He's like, I'm gonna look around this place and see what I can steal. And then he sees her chained up, and she's like, hey, bud, I recognize you. I know who you are. Just, are you going to let me out? And he's like, He's halfway out the door, and he's like, fine. And he lets her go, and she immediately gets captured again. He's so useless.
Yeah, everything about this movie is just like, if it had just been a little worse in the right ways, it would have been a much better movie.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just, it's super incoherent when it comes to what characters want or are doing at any given point. Honestly, the only characters that make sense are the villains. Mm-hmm. Because at least they have clear goals in mind, right? Yeah. Like Desert Hitler.
It's not a lot.
Yeah. And you know, shirtless, scowling, suspicious sergeant. Those guys, you know exactly what they're up to. You know exactly what they want, and they try to get the thing. David Carradine is just like floating through. It's very much the same character as in Q.
Yeah. I mean, he could have been reincarnated. I feel like this one at least, you know, wants money, which is something. We don't know why, other than to have money.
Yeah, you never get the sense that, like...
I think the only thing that anyone buys besides, you know, information and paying for David Carradine to murder other people is slaves.
Yeah, just a bazillion slaves in exchange for swords. Versus side buys slaves. The other side supplies swords. And then you never get the sense what they do with the slaves, other than just have too many people for the amount of water that you have, and then just randomly kill them for fun.
Yeah. There isn't really any kind of coherency in the movie in regards to what this town does, what anyone is really looking for out of life. I mean, they kind of have their own, you know, they have their own little goals, take over the rest of the town, but then, you know, then what? Mm-hmm. It doesn't seem like anyone comes to this town besides the slavers, and they don't really do anything except sell slaves. So
yeah,
they kind of briefly touch on this religion that David Carradine is like a holy warrior of formerly. But you never really get a sense of it other than that. It's just sort of mentioned, and the prelate's, I guess, a priest of it, but he's just kind of there.
Yeah, he's there, and he doesn't even seem particularly devout. He's like, guess our high priestess is just getting enslaved and slapped around. That happened. Like, he'll occasionally comment on something, but it's never like, hey, David Carradine, you're forgetting your vows. You need to go and do the thing. And, you know, he is not the conscience of the movie. There's no conscience in this movie. So David Carradine just does whatever chaotic, neutral thing that he wants to do. And yeah, if you compare this film to Road Warrior, right? Like, Mel Gibson's gross racism aside, that movie, and even Beyond Thunderdome, like, those films do the post-apocalyptic scarcity right. You know exactly what these people have, what they need, why other people are trying to take their thing, and the lengths that people will go to defend it or to steal it, and you know exactly why the main character is in there for his own reasons. Max needs gas, and he needs his car, and he just wants both of those things so he can go off and continue being mad out in the wastes. But he doesn't have those things. You never get the sense that David Carradine's character is in any sort of want or need of extra gold. So you have no reason to understand why he's even here fucking up this town that has reached this, like, granted, oppressive equilibrium, but most of the people are still alive.
Yeah. He just kind of blows into town. Shit happens. Shit goes down. The slavers die, I guess, which is good. And then he fucks off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It seems accidental that he did good. And that's not the message that you want from your heroic movie. At some point, he, needs to make the choice to do good. Even if it's in some small way. Like Darth Vader made that choice. Mark from G-Savior makes that choice. Like all of the characters that we've interacted with, as nonsensical and as foolish as they are, they make the choice to do good, and therefore we can root for them.
Yeah.
It never happens here. Not at all.
Nope. He just wants his money. We don't know why. It disappears, and we never really see him with what must be a veritable mountain of cash by the end of the movie.
Yeah. I don't get the sense that there is any sort of economy outside in the waste that he could use that money for.
Yeah, it's all pretty superfluous. And like you don't see loose coins anywhere. It's always just in bags, and it's always the exact amount someone suggests. There's at one point where David Carradine's like, my price is 800 Terax or whatever, and the guy just grabs a bag and throws it in and was like, that's the one with 800 and an I remember.
Yeah, and then Sergeant Shirtless is like, aren't you going to count it? He's like, nope. Because
I trust you.
that would require the prop department to make extra props, and
we're already paying the Foley department too damn much
to just like punch meat. This movie,
throw some washers into a bag and shake them around a bit.
Yeah, it's like they made a lot of choices. Some of them were interesting. Most of them were just kind of lazy. And I think that's the most disappointing thing, right? Like you want to see, the auteur's special brand of weird pasted all over the screen. But in this case, it was just a very by the numbers, what can we do with our college drama department's costume inventory, and that's it.
Yeah, this is a very that's fine, let's use that take movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, much like the main character, it felt mercenary. It felt just like we need to make a movie that is 72 minutes long or whatever. How can we do it as cheaply as possible? Go. Yeah,
I don't know that there's much more that I can say about it, honestly.
No, there's not really much worth discussing about this film past that, other than it's a weird relic of a weird time, and I'm glad that time is over because we've advanced so far. Like, I'm glad that action movies don't look as clunky as this one. I just recently watched The Matrix for another podcast, and granted, there's been like decades of evolution of action films between this one and The Matrix, but still, it's night and day. And the movies of today take their action choreography, their cinematography, all of those things a lot more seriously than this.
Yeah.
And I'm glad for it.
Definitely. This feels just sort of put together, and, they put the "that's good enough" sticker on it and moved it out.
Yeah. It puts Zardoz in a much higher sort of like pedestal place.
Yeah, I distinctly remember it sitting there and just watching like one of the sword fights, being like, I miss Zardoz right now.
Yeah, Zardoz, for all of its problems, it went for it, and it tried to make itself entertaining as much as possible. Even if it was balls to the wall, just weird.
Yeah. It was an acid trip of a sci-fi movie. This is like an ice cream nightmare of a bad movie.
Yeah, this is what happens after you eat too many Choco Tacos late at night. And I wouldn't recommend this to anybody, honestly.
Yeah. No. Look up the cover if you want. It's not bad in its own way. It's a good example of that style. The trailer's way more fun than it has any right to be, considering the movie it's advertising.
Yeah. Watch Zardoz again.
Watch any other movie, really.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, Morgan the Sorceress. Done. In the can.
Yeah. Avoided at all costs.
Yeah, let's never talk about this one again.
And if you do want to rot your brain, it's on Amazon Prime. I watched it on Verve, and there's copies on Laserdisc floating around if you really want to go that route.
Absolutely do not pay for this movie.
Yeah. If you can avoid it at all.
Yeah, like, if you can legitimately watch it streaming, do so. I am not pro piracy, but I will look the other direction if you do not want to pay for this movie.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, I almost feel bad having paid for the Laserdisc, but at least, I got the cover out of it. That's kind of worth it.
That's something that's interesting, is this and all of the movies of its ilk all have these really sweet Boris Vallejo-esque heavy metal magazine type covers that oversell the movie so much.
So much.
So
very much.
It's kind of a lost art now. I think really the only movie series that's doing it anymore is the Star Wars films.
Yeah. And even then, not quite as much. I think Guardians of the Galaxy had some pretty good posters that were approaching that, but it's definitely something I wish we'd see more of nowadays.
Yeah, I think the modern sensibilities of like, oh, it needs to be these clean designs and coherent fonts and whatever take away a little bit from. I understand why, because in the past you had to stand out on the video store shelf.
Yeah.
And now, like with Netflix and things, you're lucky if anyone ever even sees the like little clip of your movie poster or something. It's usually just like the autoplay trailer or a still that Netflix or Hulu has like picked out.
Decided, yeah.
Yeah. So, lost art.
Yep. Morgan the Sorceress, not lost as much as we wish it was.
Yeah. That's it. I'm not saying anything more about this movie.
Yeah. Next episode, probably a better movie. I mean, I can almost guarantee it.
Yeah, 100%. We'll scuttle any film that's worse.
Yeah, that's our The Warrior and the Sorcerer's pledge from now on.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for watching some interesting choices with me, Sky. Where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me at Shard _ Corso on Twitter. That's SHARD_CORSO. Where can they find you, Kate?
You can find me at Army of Meat on Twitter. Also, you can listen to my other movie-based podcast, Weaving Spaghetti. Look for that on Apple or wherever podcasts are found. We're talking about movies that we genuinely love, as opposed to this.
And if you have any suggestions for movies for us to cover, you can find us on Twitter and drop them at Interesting Choices. It's INTRESTING CHOI 6.
The number 6.
The number 6.
Okay. I mean, that's pretty good.
I feel like I did a pretty okay job considering the character limits.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you next time.
Bye.